Kaldarix the Elder, known only as Shadow Eyes in the seedy underworld that his kind inhabited, wasn't ordinarily prone to shock. He had witnessed empires crumble, species dance on the precipice of extinction, and unearthed secrets that toppled civilizations built on lies. Yet, the images relayed by a shadow weaver on a far-off planetoid sent tendrils of cold disquiet down his segmented form. The humans, a species notorious for their ambition and alarmingly short lifespans, had apparently stumbled upon something profoundly mysterious. The Lazarus Resurrection Project, as the scavenged data fragments whispered, was not a triumph of science, but a cryptic perversion of the natural order. It involved the resurrection of deceased soldiers, their bodies twisted and their eyes burning with unnatural intensity, a sight that chilled him more than the potential of planet-shattering weapons. Whispers of the Kaldarthi, a name his people had learned to dread in the millennia since their narrow escape from extinction, flickered in his mind. The Kaldarthi were a race of beings with an insatiable hunger for victory and a warped brilliance that bent reality itself to their will. The question that clawed at his mind was stark. Were the humans on the path to becoming the new Kaldarthi, or merely stumbling towards a similar, self-inflicted annihilation? He was no warrior, no rallying figure for galactic revolution. His kind, the Shadow Weavers, were creatures of cold logic and vast, interconnected networks that spanned the galaxy. They were a clandestine organization whose knowledge was their weapon and information their most precious currency. The tendrils of their organization pierced the flashy heroism of empires and the squalid underbellies of lawless sectors alike. Bounty hunters with questionable pasts, disgraced scientists seeking a second chance at discovery, even spies plucked from the very heart of warring factions. They all eventually found their way into the Shadow Weaver's web, bound by desperation and the promise of knowledge even the most powerful empires couldn't possess. A plan began to crystallize in Kaldarix's mind. The Galactic Federation, a powerful interstellar government locked in their war, likely remained dangerously blind to the scale of the horror they had birthed. It was also notoriously protective of its secrets, making conventional infiltration near impossible. This, however, presented a perilous opportunity. The first tendril reached out to the bounty hunter known as Shimmer. She was a disgraced Krellian skilled in stealth and harbored a seething hatred for the very empire that cast her out. Tasked with acquiring particular nuggets of value from a mid-level Federation research facility, she wouldn't be seeking weapons or prisoners, but the scraps the Federation overlooked. Fragments of medical data, disposal records, anything that hinted at how widespread and monstrous the Lazarus Project truly was. The second tendril coiled around a figure from the scientific fringe, a Dithilian bioengineer whose experiments bordered on the grotesque and heretical. His interest would be piqued by the sheer abnormality of Federation research, the promise of twisting their perversion of science into a dark reflection of itself. With the promise of leaked data and funding, he'd become an unintentional ally, a thorn in the Federation's side. These were but the opening moves in a long, high-stakes game. The Shadow Weavers never acted directly, instead weaving a tapestry of consequences and meticulously calculated fallout. The goal wasn't to stop the humans, at least not yet. It was to illuminate what lurked in the shadows of their desperate pursuit of immortality. Allies and enemies alike needed to understand the actual threat this project posed, not just to the current war, but to the very balance of the galaxy. Fast forward in time and Shimmer's raid turns out to be a success, but at a cost. The Federation facility is not a heavily fortified bastion laden with weapons, but a place of chilling, sterile efficiency. She witnessed not just the aftermath of the Lazarus Project, but the assembly line process for the human volunteers, as well as the forced resurrections and the conditioning designed to mold these unstoppable beings into mindless weapons. Her escape was narrow, as she carried stolen data fragments and the scars of something far darker haunting her Krellian warrior's soul. The Dithilian bioengineer, always hungry for knowledge regardless of the source, became dangerously obsessed with the fragments leaked to him. His initial hatred was replaced by a horrifying fascination. The humans had achieved something his kind deemed impossible. Not mere rejuvenation, but the weaponization of death itself. Driven by a mix of ego and genuine scientific curiosity, his experiments took an increasingly morbid turn. Rumors surfaced of monstrous hybrids engineered in hidden labs, fueled by the twisted inspiration of the Lazarus Project. Meanwhile, the Shadow Weavers continue to play the longest, most perilous game of all. The data from Shimmer's raid, carefully edited and twisted, finds its way into a network of smugglers well acquainted with Krellian black markets. The whispers aren't of invincible soldiers, but of atrocities. Fear begins to curdle beneath the grudging admiration the Krellian Empire secretly held for their human foes. On the Dithilian front, controlled leaks paint a picture of their scientists rivaling the Federation's horrific achievements. This sparks both paranoia and a perverse arms race within the Federation. Their scientists, already under immense pressure, become desperate to uncover the supposed Dithilian breakthroughs, adding desperation to their already terrifying experimentation. Kaldarix, in his hidden den, lets these tendrils spin out further. The bounty hunter Shimmer, haunted and emboldened in equal measure by what she witnessed, is tasked with an even more daring infiltration. Her target won't be a facility, but a transport carrying Lazarus soldiers directly to the front lines. It is not these Phoenix Squad abominations he has heard so much about, but a batch of new recruits, far less experienced and unlikely to sense her presence. Her task is not to sabotage, but to observe and transmit, forcing the galaxy to witness these unholy troops in action. The Dithilian bioengineer, fueled by the Federation's growing paranoia, will receive carefully crafted misinformation on behalf of the Shadow Weaver organization. It hints at a horrific next step in the Lazarus Project. Not just resurrections, but the preservation of consciousness at the moment of death, twisting these soldiers into immortal weapons fueled by echoes of their final tormented moments. Of course, it is all lies, but it will contain enough misinformation to motivate him. Kaldarix understands that the galaxy is often moved not by abstract morality, but by visceral fear. And there is no greater fear than fear of the unknown. His goal is not to defeat the Federation, but to force both allies and enemies to see the humans as a powerful adversary and an existential threat to the balance of life and death. The humans, driven by their short-sighted ambition, might have unknowingly stumbled upon a death weaponization that could consume reality's very fabric. The Shadow Weavers will ensure everyone is forced to open their eyes to the absolute truth, whether they wish to or not.